Rolando Flores, Director of the Food Processing Center and Department Head for the Department of Food Science and Technology at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Basically, one of the things that we try to do is when we develop a food product or when we, in every type of food processing process, in manufacturing, there is always byproducts. There is always something that is not used entirely. So for example, when you manufacture flour out of wheat, there is a percentage of that, depending on the level of the amount of flour that you make, that is not going to be converted into flour. So what do you do with the other part? So the idea is to identify other uses to that byproduct. And this is a very simple example I give you in terms of flour. But when we look at all the beef processing, when you look at all the fruits and vegetables processing and so on, there's largest amount of product that is not used. So the objective of this type of research, what I've been doing, is finding alternative uses. And it's not surprising that sometimes what is being developed as an alternative use, it becomes a major utilization of that. So nowadays we talk a lot about fiber and adding more fiber to the food and so on. So 10, 15 or 20 years ago, when we were making flour out of wheat, it was about 70 to 75% of the wheat was converted into white flour. The other 30 to 25% was called meal feeds. Well, that's where all the fiber is. And at that time, everything was directly for animal consumption, for animal use. Now we value more the use of the fiber. Okay? So then that's what we try to use to find that type of alternative use for that. So other times we have worked with all type of grains. But also if you look at in the meat processing industry, when you look at the yields of beef, they are very low compared to the total weight of the standing animal. And so what do you do with all those things? So there's a huge amount of industries that have developed out of that. And this type of activity is very important for a state like Nebraska, where we have raw commodities produced, because this is what adds value. So there are companies that work with byproducts specifically, and that's some of the things that we are doing. Right now we are conducting some work with some byproducts that are coming out of the orchards in Nebraska City. So the pomace, the apple pomace. So many of those have special antioxidants or other components or compounds that we call also, they have other names like nutraceuticals. If you extract those nutraceuticals, you can add them to foods and you make functional foods. The same thing when you work with dry beans, another major commodity in Nebraska. And the split peas, when the beans get split because of handling and so on. So what do you use with all of that? So that is what we're trying to use is when we look at byproduct utilization, is reduction of waste, being more efficient. Consumption and eating habits have been changing. And we know now that we need to be more efficient with some of the type of foods that we have and some of the type of products that we are eating. Like I was using the example of the white flour right now. And so how do you incorporate all those things? For example, another thing that I was working with was with barley for the manufacturing of ethanol, or corn for the ethanol, for example. So there is a lot of material that goes into the production of like a third of the corn that goes into DDGs, dry distillers solubles, okay? So what do you do with all of these? Well, these DDGs are sent to animal consumption. Well, again, we look at there, and there's a lot of fiber, there's a lot of oil. So how about if you extract that before the fermentation or the saccharification process, so that you have some sources of oils and fiber that are especially suited for human consumption, especially with a diet that we have lower on fiber, that we actually need to eat more fiber. So those are kind of a broad aspects on that. First of all, I think most of us grew up with the time and say, don't leave anything on your plate, no? So we are looking at utilization of the maximum of food products that we want. So when we look at there are two different things here. One is whatever we are going to process, try to do it, use it the most efficient, and try to use as much as we get. Now, the food scarcity is another issue that we're dealing with here, is how do we make food available in those places where the food is not available? How do we bring the food there? And there's a lot of studies that say that we have enough food produced currently in the world to feed everyone. The problem is where the food is and where the consumption is. So how do we make that food available in those places? For example, we don't have to go too far. And here we see a lot of we're talking about flour, we're talking about need of fiber, and increase the consumption of fiber in our diet. But that's not even a problem for some other parts, other latitudes in the world, in which they need is a source of energy. And our obesity problems here and in most of all the developing world is because of we are eating too much energy. Okay? So this a complete imbalance is what we are having here. So how do we make that food accessible to all those parts of the world where food is not available? And there's not an easy answer that goes with that. Of course, ship it, take it over there, produce it over there. Well, yes, if we talk about some areas of Africa where the conditions of weather do not allow for growing the amount of food that they are needed there. So you need to ship. How do you bring that over there? So I think one is the concept of being efficient in terms of using all the nutrients that the food product or the raw material has. That's what we are talking about doing research in byproduct utilization and so on. And the other one is how do we bring the basic food that some parts of the world need? They need because they don't even have the source of energy. We have a problem of, we have an excess of energy here. And that's because of the type of diets that we have. And if we're talking about that, we're talking about issues like, for example, how long does it took the human being to go from a hunter to a farmer, and from a farmer that you have the energy needs because you were burning all that energy in the field, and in front of the computer you don't burn too much of that energy. So that's a very interesting field of work in how our digestive system has evolved and how fast we change it. We're talking about 120 years of change for something that's taking hundreds of years to reach to us how you utilize the energy. And then suddenly, in the last 100, 120, 150 years, we changed completely our habits. Before you used to go and you either walk a lot or work in the fields and so on. Now if we walk 3 miles a day because we do the exercise, we don't burn all the energy that we eat. So, and also that is creating other issues with our digestive and gastrointestinal tract. And that brings us to other concepts or other areas of research that my department is conducting right now in terms of the utilization of the foods by our digestive system and how the microflora has changed. Has it changed? I don't know. That's what some of the faculty in my department is trying to look is the evolution of the gut microbiota has been it is because of environment or how is it? So that's a different component. So you asked me about something a little bit different, which was the scarcity and the utilization. I think there is a lot of organizations worldwide that are trying to work on that. Every time you see efforts in different parts of the world trying to make farmers to be more efficient in the production, to farm or to produce products that are more appropriate to the conditions where they are, because that's the other component, the sustainability. I can tell you can go at many parts of the world, you can plant corn, but the yields are going to be very low, or the soils are not very appropriate, so you have to do a lot of adding a lot of nutrients and so on. So there is a lot of organizations, a lot of people working into that. How we are more efficient in the production, in the availability of food. But then there is another very important component, which is reduction of losses, post-harvest losses. When you look at it in many latitudes where they are, for example, if you look at India, India is a blessed country when you look at it. They can have 3 crops of rice a year. We can only have here 1 crop of products a year because look at the weather doesn't allow it. You can have 3 crops a year. And then you say, well, how come there's still so much starvation or so many people need food? Because of the post-harvest losses. So when you can have that between 20 and 40% of the crop is lost before it reaches the consumer or before it reaches the production part. So are we talking about, here we're talking about byproduct utilization. Over there we're talking about how do we actually make it so the food reaches the point of consumption. In some cases, is how do you, there is no way, like I have visited India several times, and there is a lot of people working toward this because everyone knows what the problems are. For example, you have some vegetables, and you go and take them to the market. So they take them in a basket. Well, but the temperatures outside are pretty hot, 90 degrees, 100 degrees Fahrenheit outside. They go to the market. By the time they walk into the market and they have this basket with the top layer, which it could be 1/3, is already heat damage. Or the ways how they thresh the rice out of the plant. You cut it, but how do they remove the hull out of the rice? In some places, it's allowed by law to put all that crop on the road. So the cars pass it. When the cars pass by and run over it, they thresh it. So then you separate the kernel. But how much should that get lost? So there really are huge losses from that. I mean, and we're talking, I'm not kidding, we're talking about 40% in some cases in fruits and vegetables. So when we look at that, when we look at the increases in production, so we not only have to look at how do we increase the yield, how do we increase the delivery of the food. Comparisons are not always nice, unless you are on the top. Otherwise, no one wants to be below someone else. But it is a matter of market economics too. When there are other needs, look at all the high levels of production of beef that we have here in Nebraska, of corn, of wheat, of dry beans, and so on. The specific case of dry beans. Well, we eat very little dry beans. And it's one of the major and most efficient ways to produce protein. It's more efficient. And so if we sell our protein, like with dry beans or beef, to places where they need it, it implies a direct benefit, economic benefit to Nebraskans. Nebraska, and that's one of the things why we say that Nebraska is so ideally located in the heart of the United States. Nebraska can be, and where we are located in Lincoln, the food capital of the world, because of the availability of food, or largest, and the research that we are doing, and so on. So, first of all, from any point of view, everyone needs to be conscious about the nutrition, because either you have a good nutrition, or you are going to suffer from that. You're going to get ill. Obesity is something, or even overweight, it has a lot of consequences. Affect your joints, even sleeping is affected, everything. Okay, so we need to be aware of that. And the trends in the society are not for less obese or less overweight. They are more. So as a general concerned citizens, we need to be aware of the nutrition. What is the other point that we always talk? The cost of healthcare. Well, how much does it cost diabetes, how much to treat diabetes, to treat obesity, and so on, if it is something that we can control? Okay, so there's another one there. And how about you asking about the comparison with other parts of the world? Okay, I mentioned to you one of them is the possibility of exporting. It brings economic stability to the state. It looks for markets. Every time we have our dedicated state individuals that try to promote the Nebraska products overseas, every time you go and put a Nebraska product overseas, it's not alone. Keep in mind that there's a lot of countries producing dry beans, a lot of countries producing beef, and in some places cheaper, less expensive. So we are battling the market. So we need to know what is needed. Where do we put it? No one is, there used to be a time that people used to wait, okay, the food is going to come from country A or country B. But not nowadays. Whoever pays the best the best price, whatever is the accessibility, that's why natural markets are so important. Where do we sell our products? If we're going to ship something all across the world versus something that is closer, and then it comes the economic advantage of some of those things. So food is extremely complex. It's not just only what is good for me and what is good for everyone. And is no doubt, with any doubt, that Nebraska, the food is extremely important. We are producers of food. We need to know what's going on everywhere. That's one of the goals that we are trying to have here at the Department of Food Science and Technology, is the food for the individual. For many times we were saying the food for the masses. Yeah, we can do that. But now we're looking at the food for the individual, how you need some specific needs of food. What is that food going to be doing for you? What do you need to do for it? How do you stay healthier? And the word, so food, not only it keeps you viable to continue surviving and to continue producing, and health, it ties along with the cost, health cost. So if we have not only an efficient food manufacturing and production, but also producing the food that is going to make you healthier. And we need to do a lot of changes in habits, and because the fact that we change from a more sedentary way of working But also keep in mind, and this is not me, I read it in a book, the war, the jobs war. One of the things is, you look back, it used to be a time when everyone used to smoke. Right now, you feel very few people to smoke. So most probably, hopefully, we'll say, do you remember that time when everyone was overweight or obese? Now we're not. So I think there's a lot of hope. And we really play a role in as agents of change at the university. Well, I think, it's kind of the interesting thing. This United States as a country has many roles in history in the last 150 years, from protector of the democracy to feeding the world. And we cannot assume, or being so egocentric, to see that we're going to solve all the food problems of everyone, because it's not. Okay, I was just mentioned to you where the need is and how do you move those foods to where the needs are. There's a lot of people thinking how to tackle this issue. But Nebraska, when you look at the area per capita available for food production, is huge. In general, in the Midwest. But it's not only the per capita production in the Midwest, but also the conditions for production. See, we have ideal conditions for growing crops. Not all of them, of course, but some major crops that feed masses. That's what we have here. And we have a very efficient system of production in Nebraska. But not only is the efficiency, but the quality of the system and the quality of the foods that are produced here. So I think if you look at it in a general sense, from from an economic point of view, from a geopolitical point of view, we have a big impact worldwide. But also, we have, when we are taking care of the land that is in the state of Nebraska, in some way, we do have a responsibility of producing and manufacturing all that food, which is Nebraskans have really come true by having increasing yields. And yes, it's true, when you look at it the 50 years from now, or 2050, which is 40 years from now, 38 years from now, are we going to have enough food? Some people say that we are going to have enough food. Other ones say we don't. And of course, unless you have a crystal ball, you can say one way or the other. But the numbers tend to indicate that, yes, there's going to be a need of more food. And also, the distribution of that food is going to be even more critical of where it is. So as a food scientist, we do have a lot of responsibilities of being more efficient in terms of not only in the food production, but also in the food manufacturing, in the food distribution, and also in designing the foods for the individual. I think, I said, I refer at the beginning, some of my generation, we grew up with the finish everything that is on your plate. There are some people starving, and it hasn't changed. There's still people starving, and we're still leaving a lot of foods wasted on the plates. When I was in one of the previous research opportunities, I did a lot of work on residues from hotels and institutional. And it's amazing because of the amount of food that gets wasted. So is there challenges for us? Yes, there is. As a food scientist, do we want to deliver that food to you? Then we saw that not only is the need of the energy, the calories that you need. No, we're well beyond that now. So it's not only the calories, but how about the food that is going to prevent you from being obese, but also the food that is going to give you antioxidants? How about the food that is going to contain natural ingredients that is going to prevent you to having to go into medicines, or that prevent you to getting ill, to prevention of diseases, stuff like that. So I think pretty much everything that makes us sick, either we take it, we absorb it, or it is by contact, because it's viruses, or we end eating it in one way or another. Everything that goes through your nose or our mouth or any other conduct is how it makes us sick. So we see, and at least we see that the food can be a conduit to prevent all that. And that's why we talk about probiotics and prebiotics. And we look at all, we try to understand how the food in the intestinal tract, which is the major part of your organism that is used, where it is transferred, the nutrients are transferred. And how are those mechanisms? So it is, right now food is extremely complex. It's a very complex system. Well, I think this subject of nutrition, the subject of food availability, of food scarcity, the positive, and the future of foods, I think a lot is at stake. We're in a great situation. We're perfectly located. We have great growing conditions. We have fantastic soils. We have the know-how, and we have the political will to bring Nebraska to the forefront more than what already is, and the research that we are doing in food science, and the outreach that we are doing through the Food Processing Center, that is not only here in Nebraska, with the entrepreneurs of Nebraska, with the consumers and producers in Nebraska, but all over, I think are putting the parts of the puzzle that is going to make us bigger players. And that's what I think it is very important. We're never going to be the only players, but we want to be positioned as good players.